Hi, welcome back to another web development video where I show you how to build modern websites with JavaScript, CSS3, and HTML5. And in this video we're going to cover a nice little UI design pattern, I guess. So when you have an alert like this that comes up on the page and it's something that can be dismissed by the user, we want to be able to click and do something, and I'm going to show you how to just make this animated and go off the screen, and then everything is going to kind of, if I click this one, it'll go off the screen and then it'll move up a little bit. We could also just do a kind of a basic opacity change where it fades out. But we're going to do the fading out and everything using CSS3, not jQuery or JavaScript. So we're only going to use the jQuery in order to apply a class so that we can run the animation. So what we have here is just the basics. So we have 3 alerts or cards, and those are over here. These could be media groups. These could be whatever you want to be able to dismiss. So it could be anything. And we have this media group close, which we're going to use. That's this X right here. So that's our close button. And then you can see the CSS here. We're going to focus more on the JavaScript and what we need to do in order to make all this happen. Actually, let's do the animations first. So when we click media group close, we want some sort of animation to happen. Now the animation that I originally thought about was just a fade, and then it moves everything up. So we'll just work on that and we'll see how far we get. So I'm just going to call the animation media close, and we're going to put the animation property, and that takes several values. One is the name of the animation that we're going to create, which I'm just going to call close. One is how long does it take, so we'll just guess like 500 milliseconds, so half a second. And then we'll just say ease for now. We might actually wind up changing that. And I'm also going to put forwards. Now what forwards does is it's called the fill mode, the animation fill mode, and what that does is it determines what happens when the animation ends. So when it ends, you can choose for the animation to go backward, you can choose for the animation to continue going forward, which means that the animation ends and it doesn't reset itself. If you don't put anything here, I believe the animation will just reset itself. So and the problem with that is that it will reset all the settings. So what we want is the settings in our animation close to stay with the media group. Okay, so when we want the animations, the properties to stay with the thing that you're animating, then you do forwards. Okay, so that was not the best explanation, but you can look up animation fill mode, and you can read more about it at Mozilla Developer Network or in any other tutorials online. Alright, in order to create our animation, we're going to say at keyframes close, and we need it to start at 0% and we need it to end at 100%. So what we want it to look like at 0% is opacity of 1. So we're just going to do a basic fade out. So opacity of 1, and then when it gets to the end of the animation at 100%, we want the opacity to be 0. So at every 10%, it's going to take off 0.1 on the opacity. And so if we just come up and we add media close, you can see what happens. So let's take this off, and then when we add it on, watch the Marley's ghost up here. You can see that it fades out, right? Okay, so that's exactly what we want, but one of the problems is that we're left with a bunch of space here. So what we also need to do is we need to say to display none. So you can see here that it moves everything up because display none takes it off of the page completely. If you use something like visibility. If you use visibility hidden, what it does is it leaves the space here. So all it does is hide it, but it's still taking up space on the page. So we actually want to move everything up and get it off the page. So we just go back to DisplayNone. So when we do that, it takes it off the page, and it also runs this animation. Now we're going to have to come back and do something else to this later, because you'll see that once the DisplayNone kicks in, the animation doesn't matter because it's just going to go, when you click it, it's just going to go to nothing. You won't see the animation. So we have to use what's called a set timeout in JavaScript in order to let the animation run, and then when the animation is finished running, then we can add the DisplayNone. So what we want to do is programmatically, so right now I'm manually putting this on here, but what we want to do is programmatically put that on there. So when I click on this X, it should add this class of media close to this big wrapper that's called media group. So that's what we're going to use our JavaScript to do. So we come in and we want to target the media group close, and I'm using jQuery, by the way. So on click, then you can run the function. Whoop. Let's try that again. And let's just open this up a little. So we can run this function. And what we want to do is we want to find this element here. Okay. And what we also want to do is when we click this, we don't want to add that class to all of the media groups, because then it'll close them all at the same time. So if we just say so if we just target media group and we say add class media close, then you'll see that it adds it to all of them, even when we click one. So that is not what we want. You can also see that our DisplayNone goes way too fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that off, and you'll be able to see that they all fade out together because we're just targeting all of the media group classes. That is not what we want. We want to specifically pick out this media group or this media group, whichever one that we've chosen to click. So when we click on this one, we only want this one to go away. Now the way that we do that is an easy way is to just create a variable that's called this. You don't necessarily have to, but it's good to cache things. So when I click on the media group close, then it's going to create a variable called this, and this is related to, like if I click here, this is related to this this close button, and when I click here, this is related to this close button. Okay, so it belongs to this click, and then we can target just what's around it. And one of the ways that we can do that is we can say this dot parents should get us there, and we'll see if it just adds it to one. Oh, that wasn't it. So what we want to say is we can say parents, I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. So parents, and we go up to media group. Okay. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying when we click on this, we need to go up the DOM tree. I'll show you in the HTML. When we click on this media group close, since it's indented and inside this media group, we need to go up the DOM tree. So we need to get out of this and go up a level. And one of the ways that we go up a level is to do parents. So it looks at the parents, and it will just keep bubbling up and finding the parents. If you do a specific parent, then it will go up until it gets to that specific parent, which is media group. Okay, so that's essentially what we're doing with the jQuery. We're just traversing, they call it traversing the DOM. And this is the DOM. It's the model that's underlying, the code that's underlying on the page. So you're going up the tree. That's where we need to go. And we go up until media group, and then we add the class media close only to that one. You'll see it happens here too, and it happens here too, because it's only registering the parent of the thing that we clicked, of the actual this actual media group close, or this actual media group close. Okay. And remember, I told you what happens when you click here is that it leaves an empty space. That's not what we want. What we want is actually to have another class. We can do this programmatically in the JavaScript. I'll show you how to do that too. But I'll also show you how to add a class. So we'll do something called MediaRemove, and that would just be DisplayNone. I prefer to use classes whenever possible in order to control the layout and the styling. I do not prefer to do styling inside of the JavaScript, but that is mostly a personal preference. I don't know that there's a lot of difference in performance, but you can do what you want. So I'm going to show you both ways. First would be to say the same thing. So we want to add a class to this thing again. Okay. Now I've tried this using something called delay. So if we delay for 500 seconds, and then we try to add the class of MediaRemove. Watch it work this time. It never works, but watch it work this time. But it doesn't happen. It never gives me a delay, and I can never figure that out in jQuery. So I do know that set timeouts work. So what we're going to do is use what's called the set timeout. And what this does is it waits for a certain number of seconds before it runs whatever's inside this function. So we set a function to so we need to do whatever our function here, so function here, and then we also need to do how long do we want this function to delay before it runs. And for us, because we're choosing 500 milliseconds for the media close, we want the space to be closed up after the animation is run, so it needs to be at least 500 milliseconds. And there's no need to put the ms, you can just write that. And what we're going to do for our function is we're going to say the same thing, this.parents. You can take off this old stuff here. So we're going to say this.parents up to the media group, so the same media group that we targeted before, and then we're going to add the class of MediaRemove, so we can just kind of take that out. So this is our JavaScript when we're finished. So we target whichever X that we're using or clicking, and then we say go up to this X's parent, which is this big wrapper here, this big gray box, and then add the class of media close. That's our fade out. And then after 500 milliseconds, then go back to this wrapper and then add the class of MediaRemove, and that should actually remove it from the page, and then everything else should shift upwards. There we go. And so you get a nice little fade out effect. For a lot of people this is done with JavaScript, but it is actually possible now with CSS Animations. And then we'll take it one step farther. Actually, let me show you how to do that inside the jQuery too if you wanted to. So we would target same thing. Only we're not going to add a class. We're actually going to change the CSS here in the JavaScript. So I like to go ahead and make this. I like to go ahead and add the brackets inside. You could do this if you're just doing one media declaration or one CSS declaration. You could do it without these and just do the parentheses. But I prefer to do it this way because if I want to add things, then it's easier. So the way that we target the CSS is we need a key, we need a property, and we need a value. So essentially a key value pair. And the key is a property value, a CSS property value. So what we want to say is display, and then a colon, and then none. And that's all that you have to do. So this is essentially just setting the CSS for this media group programmatically inside the JavaScript after 500 milliseconds, and it's going to act the exact same way as what we did before, only it's being controlled through the JavaScript. We're not just adding a new class in the CSS. Again, this is not my preferred method, although at times you might find that you need to do that because it's easier, or because doing it through adding a class is just going to be a little bit too difficult. So I have had times when I've done that, but whether you use one or the other, it's the same thing in effect. So you can see that. Now you can control all kinds of variables. You can control how long it takes for to wait before you remove it from the DOM. You can also change this. So if you want a slower excuse me, if you want a slower fade out, and that's a slower fade out, you see how that fades out a little bit slower. If you want a quicker fade out, then you just make the number smaller, and that's a really fast fade out action. I settled on 500. I think 400 or 500, maybe 6 at the most is probably okay. And the last thing I want to show you is we can do more than just fade out. We can actually move it. So sometimes you've seen it where you click on it and it slides to the right or to the left. Sliding to the right seems good and right to me, so that's what we're going to do, but you could do it either way. So what we do is we come down to our animation declaration, the animation that we call close, and at 0% we use something called transform translate X. So translate X moves things along the X axis. If you use translate Y, it would move things along the Y axis. And then transform is the property, but translate X is kind of the value calculation that we're going to use. So let's just copy that, because what we want it to do is move off the screen to the right. And in order to do that, we add a positive number. So you think of this as 0, and then positive numbers go this way and negative numbers go this way. So we can do anything. We could do pixels, we can do viewport units, we can do percentages. What I want is for 100%, like as wide as this is, I want it to go off the page. So I'll just go say 100%, and when it starts it's going to be at 0, so where it initially is, and then it's going to translate on the x-axis to the right 100%, so however wide the element is, it's going to go that far to the right. And this is going to happen whenever we click close, and then after that our media remove is going to come into play as well. So when we click on, it goes off the screen and fades out at the same time. Now you'll notice down here that something happens. You see how we get that bar? Because what it's doing is pushing our element to the right. And if we did not, if we just do this, you'll see that what it does is it just translates our element. Actually, now it's got a 0 opacity. So if all we did was move it, you could see that all we're doing is moving it 100%, right? And then what it's doing is making the canvas bigger, so it's actually, it's going off the page this way. A couple of things you can do to prevent that if you wanted to is to make these elements fixed, or to make them somehow register outside of the DOM, because right now they're absolutely positioned to this app here. And that would be a little bit of tinkering. One thing I played with too was having a smaller time before it actually takes it off of the page. So if you decrease the time to take it off the page, then you decrease how much this happens. So obviously you can do it without any sort of fading animation. That's what we did there. But with the fade, it provides a little kind of interesting, fade out effect. You've seen this on different applications and things like that. So let's say you have alerts. Let's say you have animation